If you use AI as a tool, all of a sudden you can produce more, you can add more value.
Some of those downs that I had were really, really painful downs. But each time I had that down, I created these scars and I looked at money a lot differently.
We're taught in finance to live to one day of retirement and then just sacrifice our whole life until then.
All right. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. You know, it's rare that I bring on a guest multiple times on the show. The person has to be really, really, really special if we're going to make that happen. And that is my guest. Anytime it comes to money, like, you know, predictable profits, we do a good job helping people make money in their companies. But then, like, what do you do that when that money hits your own personal bank account, your own personal wallet? How do you keep more of that? How do you multiply that your wealth and so forth? The thing is, I've been around and been doing this for a long time, and most people make a whole bunch of mistakes, and it's not really their fault. It's just the advice they're getting is incorrect. And I'm involved in a number of different communities and circles, surrounded by some of the top 7, 8, even a few 9-figure CEOs. This one name continues to get brought up over and over and over and over again as the go-to guy that they go to for financial advice. So I want to bring you the best of the best. And we're at this time of year where money is a topic of conversation. So without further ado, Garrett Gunderson, welcome to the show, my friend.
I keep seeing, predictable profits in your business and board of directors, like all over the place is like a top 5, top 1, all this, and I'm like, dude, that's pretty cool. And you find out from people sending you messages, they don't even interview you, which I think is great. But I want to know if you're like podcast viewers and listeners know about your dancing ability and how you went over your wall.
That's one of those days I might actually show that one of these days.
I did get to see it. I was like, hey man, it worked, right? It worked. Here you are.
Oh man, I can't believe you brought that up. I don't even know if people could tell if my face is turning red or whatnot if they're watching this, but yeah, no, that was a crazy moment in life. But
choreographed dance. I mean, come on, man.
It works. I met my wife that way, right?
Hey, I like it.
So, yeah, you got a goal, you got to go for it. Dude,
I'm trying to tell my son he's get out of the house more. He's been learning West Coast swing, and he's just like been such an introvert and, had a little bit of delay with his, you've met him before, just like socially. And I'm like, every day I'm just like beating the drum of like, hey man, where are you going to do out of the house today? Who are you going to go hang out with? Like ask a girl out, even if she says no, it's okay. You'll get over it. Like, right. And if she says yes, that's cool. Like just do it, man. Like it's just an interesting world. And that made me think of like his uncle's like, dude, you should get in the West Coast swing. There's all these cute girls at these ballroom events and, 1 out of 3 dudes are gay. So there's the number.
It was one of those things that when I decided to do it, I was single back in the day and I'm like, where do all the best looking women hang out? And then, they joined this dance group and I'm like, well, you know what? If that's where they are, I'm going to do it. But there weren't any guys on the team. And I knew I could do one thing. I could pick them up. And I'm like, well, I don't know that I could dance, but I could at least pick them up. And I made them laugh and it was good. And, it was great because it made me very uncomfortable. I was so nervous right before like the lights came on and everything else, like so nervous, like it was this overwhelming feeling of I can feel my body shaking. And I was like, I just peed, but I got to feel like I got to pee again. Like what's happening right now? Right. But just doing that, constantly putting yourself in situations and getting out of that comfort zone, I feel is such a strong part of growth. Like, I mean, you've been on, how many times on average, do you speak on stage a year? Would you say?
Like I probably speak somewhere around like 25 to 30 times a year.
And
on a stage.
Do you ever get nervous anymore when you speak?
Yeah. And what's weird is I got nervous a couple months ago just because I didn't know anyone there. And it was like it was a smaller room. It was like 50 people. And I found myself being a little bit nervous before I went up.
Wow.
And comedy, I almost always got nervous before I went up, but that's kind of the fun of it. Like you raise the stakes and there's some additional nerves and then there's more endorphins and excitement that's released by doing it. So I don't know if you get nervous when you speak, but it still comes up for me. I mean, I know that I've rehearsed. I know that I've been doing it for a long time. And it's not like the first time I spoke. I was 15. I remember I was like going to give this speech to a panel of judges about my little car detailing business, Garrett Gunderson's Car Care.
Wow.
And it's the same thing, man. I had to go to pee like 8 times before I went in there, right? Because you're so nervous that all the involuntary systems, like, they don't have anything managing it. And so, but I told the joke, I took 3rd place, and I gained a little bit of confidence. I gained a little bit of skill. I just got just enough momentum, and early on, I remember I had this guy, Roberto, to come and watch me give a speech in Costa Mesa. It was probably 2006, 2000, yeah, around that time. And it was a terrible speech because I was so nervous and it wasn't a really good setup, but like he filmed it. He invested the time with me, tell me the ways I could improve it. And, just like you just have to be willing to have that feedback. And, I just remember even like going to meet with some of my first clients when I just started in finance. And then these guys that were much older than me, bringing them to meet with them and being super nervous. And like, man, you build the muscle by confronting it.
And it's Tony Robbins would talk about how, you got to do one thing a day that scares you, right? And I think you might know this, but I invested $250,000 between my wife and I to travel the world with Tony Robbins just because we felt we were at this point where we needed to just figure something out, right? Figure out life. Right? This was a few decades ago. And just this exercise of anytime I found myself in a period of comfort is when I lost money. You just take your foot off the gas pedal, you feel like you've made it, and then momentum starts to work against you. Tony likes to talk about when you stop growing, you start dying. And I feel the same way happens in life and in business, that the moment you stop really leaning in and try to push things forward, you make a lot more mistakes. I was interviewed on the NASDAQ, and the reporter said to me, I read in your book that you love a bad economy. And I'm just kind of curious, like, why? And it's like, there's no such thing as a good or a bad economy. They're just different economies, but good economies, mistakes go unnoticed, and bad economies, mistakes get punished. So it's an opportunity for the strategic entrepreneur to get a massive advantage. Because in B school, they teach you to like cut down your expenses, scale back, go sit in the corner, just wait things out, lay people off, reduce your marketing. That's really when the marketplace starts to open up and you can capture more and more market share.
Well, I remember reading an article. This is a long time ago, but I was just getting into finance. This is probably like 98, 99. And it had been about an earlier recession from like a decade before that, before the big 90s run. And it was McDonald's and Burger King. And when the recession hit, Burger King's philosophy was they called it a nuclear winter. They said, we're going to hunker down. We're going to reduce our expenses. We're just going to make it to the other side. So they had a survivalist mentality.
Wow.
McDonald's said, now's the time to up our marketing budget. Now's the time to buy the real estate that wasn't affordable before, that it's going to be down. And they gained 51% more market share than Burger King over that recession. Wow. 51%, right? Just a different philosophy, different mindset, different way to look at things. And one of these indicators in the economy is when unemployment increases, it's a precipice of, on the other side, there's going to be an explosion of wealth, because what happens is businesses now have the ability to recruit that are good businesses, and the businesses that weren't good businesses that didn't make it, you can start to bring in those employees that lost their jobs, that were actually able to be really productive, but they just didn't want to switch from what they had known. And so there's a certain time where it's detrimental, but then there's a certain time where that it hits a certain level that like, things are about to get really in a growth spurt.
Wow. Yeah. And actually so many of the world's most successful companies were born out of some type of difficult market environment.
Yeah. I don't know if there's this guy, Professor Gregory. He is a professor, or was, at the University of Washington, who a lot of his studies were in the Great Depression, and he taught a lot on it. And I read an article from him that said in the Great Depression, 1/3 of the people were what you saw. See, because banks could be like, hey, you need to pay this note off, even though you are making your payments on time, because they get call notes. And so 1/3 of the people were, hungry. They might be, not having their own home. It might be a really tough situation, like we saw in the pictures that were so devastating. But 1/3 of the people during the Great Depression actually maintained. They maintained their lifestyle. It might have been a little bit harder. They might have had to do a little bit more work. It might not have been secure, but 1/3 of the people actually grew and made more money. And to this time, it's still the time where more new millionaires were made, adjusted for inflation, than any other time in American history.
In the Depression.
Right. Coming out of that and during that time, because leadership is what we're looking for. Problems needed to be solved. Resources became more easy to access. People were willing to do work. Sometimes when we look at these economies where everything seems like it's just on cruise control and it's just growing big clip, like you said, businesses get lazy. They don't trim the fat. Because they have an abundance of cash flow, they don't consider whether it's the appropriate way to allocate the funds. And it's just really easy to make mistakes. During more difficult times, we get a lot more resourceful, a lot more strategic, and it actually builds a strength to actually produce more value.
Now, people do the same thing when money is coming in and it's abundant, the economy is going well, and they have easy access to cash and they can borrow it cheaply and the whole deal. They generally tend to be a little lazy with their discipline. They spend more money and so forth, and they only tighten their budget when things get, more difficult. So how do you apply the same philosophy with the clients that you work with in markets like this, where it just seems to be shooting straight up? Now, that's Wall Street shooting straight up. Main Street, several of those people are feeling a little bit of pinch. Now, we can discuss why that is, because they just don't realize their business has been disrupted by AI, but it actually has in the ways that are just not obvious to them right now. So let's pretend for a minute things are going great. What is your investment philosophy, or other than, I know you talk about, look, keep the cash that you're making. So there's all these tax savings philosophies. How does your philosophy change in bull markets versus bear markets?
So more money to be made for the minority in bear markets, where the majority makes money in the bull market. So I'll talk about the difference there.
Yeah.
But simplicity and automation is the beginning. So no matter what's going on in the market, take 18% off the top when you're paying yourself personally and set it aside. 5/6 of that go into a regular, I don't care whether it's a savings account, whether it's silver, whether it's gold. It could even be somewhat in Bitcoin. Probably you need $2 for every dollar that you're going to count, but you just have liquidity. And it's not 3 to 6 months. That's BS. It's 6 months minimum. 3 months or 6 months is an eternity of difference. It's 100% different amount of time.
Yeah.
The reason financial people say 3 to 6 is because they don't think people will get to 6. But I'm going to show you how you get to 6. So you pay yourself off the top. You set aside 18% of what comes in, and then you take 1/6 of that and put it in a living wealthy account. This is guilt-free spending. This is that you already saved 15%. The other 3% is for you to just enjoy life a little bit. And whatever it is that you want to enjoy and spend the money on, you do it because it reminds you you're doing the right things. Now, when you've got that 6 months of liquidity, now that you've automatically saved, now you deliberately invest. And that comes down to knowing your investor DNA.
Yeah.
What investments are good for you? Some people are good at real estate. Some people aren't. Some people are great at business. Other people aren't. Some people are great creating intellectual property like yourself. Other people aren't. So what you do is you pick a category you could focus on to grow that wealth, and you really invest first in yourself for that skill set and for the team before you directly invest into the thing. Most people skip that step. They're kind of indoctrinated that money is a game of reduction. So if they just save enough, they'll have more money in the future. Well, that's not the most intelligent way to get there. I like to think the investor way, which is the first stop, your money's into yourself. Like what you teach at Predictable Profits. Don't have one line of money that comes in from a marketing standpoint. Have different places. Maybe you have 10 different places. So if one of them doesn't work, you've got all these other places driving revenue all the time, which creates so much capacity for you. And we don't budget highly producing revenue things. If I put $1 into an ad and $2 comes out the other side, I'm going to go ahead and put another $1 in, or another $1 or another $1 till all of a sudden it's no longer a $2 ratio. Maybe put in $1 and only 90 cents comes out. Now I reevaluate, but I don't budget productive things. So I differentiate my expenses into productive expenses, like things that add more money to the bottom line. I want to increase that as long as that's still true. Protective expenses must be addressed. I have to make sure I have the right asset protection, the right, trust planning, the right liquidity, like we talked about before, even the right insurance to transfer risk. And then I want to manage my lifestyle expenses where I pay cash for lifestyle expenses rather than borrow. And I want to eliminate destructive expenses. So I paid myself first in an automated way. I built up my liquidity and established amount of money. And then I deliberately invest in first and foremost cash flowing assets. So for business owners, that means before we go invest in things we know nothing about, like options trading or tax liens or an index fund that we don't control the companies or get any cash flow from, maybe what we look at is, do we have the right people in our business? Do we have the right profit centers that are functioning and that we've given the full amount of money and attention to develop? And do we have the right processes and procedures that support that in an automated way that allow me to scale the business? And then as I scale the business, I take a percentage that comes off as the owner, not just a flat salary, which allows me to translate my business wealth into personal wealth and not only invest in things that I know, which ultimately might be back into my business, but my business has an insatiable appetite, so I can't put every dollar there. I want to eventually turn some of that into the personal side, but too many people rob from their business and they put it into an index fund. I mean, Apple wouldn't do that. Microsoft wouldn't do that. Any major company wouldn't say, let's take our excess profits and let's put it into our competitors and hope that they're going to pay us some dividends or hope that they're worth more in the future. But small businesses are taught to do that because of fear, because of a lack of financial intelligence or knowledge. And I feel the best thing a business owner can do is to save tax, save interest, save on non-performing investment fees and commissions that drag, and design insurance properly so they get 10% or more of their income coming into their personal life without taking an extra dollar from the business. And what it does is allows the business to grow faster while still building the platform and foundation personally.
You just said something, and and it actually makes so much sense when you said, what is Apple going to take money and then invest it in their competitors? Small business owners, for whatever reason, they look at the other businesses out there and they don't see other companies as their competitors because they're a public company, but in a sense, they're a competitor. And even if they go, well, actually, they're not a competitor. They're not in the industry. My clients wouldn't do business with them. Your competitor is anybody that is looking for access to the single dollar that people have set aside, whether they're going to invest in themselves or they're going to invest in their business, because there are different levels of competition. We all have a certain amount of cash that we're going to invest in our business or ourselves. And so you are essentially sending money to a competitor in many ways. It's an interesting way of looking at it. I was talking to an agency owner and I said, well, let's look at how much money he wants to grow his company. Let's look at, what your ROAS is on your return on ad spend on your investment capital. It's 6-1. So it's pretty good. 6-1. And at some point later in the conversation, he was talking about his investments that he was making. And I stopped and I was like, wait a minute, hold on. You're talking about all these market investments that you're making, and he put all this money in Bitcoin and everything. And I know he's going to be listening to us. This is funny. So he knows I'm going to be talking about him here. But I'm like, so you put all this money in Bitcoin, you put all this money in market investments and whatnot. You're making 6-1 ROAS. Have you hit your limit on what you can spend in marketing right now in your ad spend? He goes, no. Could you spend more money in that ad spend? Well, yeah, we could. So you're making a 6-1. 6 times more money for every dollar you're spending, but yet you're taking that capital and you're investing it in Bitcoin or any other market, making what? I mean, if you do one of the top funds in the world has averaged 27% year after year, and that makes him one of the best in the entire world. So we can't expect our market investments to perform consistently over 27%. You'd be some of the best. So 6-1, Warren Buffett would give his left leg if he could make 6-1 investment nonstop. But people don't think like that.
And the reason is because non-entrepreneurs have been indoctrinated with, we have to create a retirement fund. And this retirement fund is in case things don't work in the business, in case we don't want to work for the rest of our lives. Even though, there's a lot of things that are interesting about business. There's people that spend their whole life building something and expertise so deep, and then they sell it. Now they get a lump sum of money. They go invest in things they know nothing about. Very risky.
Right.
Why not just build a business that you don't drain your energy with it because you have the right infrastructure and people around it? And then you have this cash flowing machine that's also very tax advantaged and that you can still influence if you choose to influence. You don't have to be working 7 days a week when you're 80 years old. That's a complete choice. You don't have to work that long if in the early years, if you do and build it right. So that's part of it. But I just think that there's so many people that are out there shouting from the mountaintops, pay off your mortgage and put all your money in a retirement plan because it's the safe thing to do. Is it the safe thing to do? When we pay off a mortgage, we're paying more useful dollars today to pay off less cost dollars in the future.
Yeah.
Meaning a dollar today is worth a lot more than a dollar 10 years from now, simply because of inflation. So if I can have a loan against an asset, whether that's a business or whether that's a cash flowing piece of real estate or something like that, if I do all I can to pay that off, I take really valuable dollars to get to zero, to get to the point where not cash flowing for me. And then secondarily, I trap my money into a plan I can't take out till 59 and a half without a very few exceptions into companies I know nothing about, that I'm not in the boardrooms of, and that they don't cash flow, and that they might be the very companies trying to put me out of business. And I'm actually saying, here you go, here's some more, because that's what our parents taught us, because that's what their parents taught them, because that's what the news is telling us. And just like I don't get my news from legacy media, I don't know if we should get our financial advice from legacy Wall Street, from legacy index planner, you know?
I have a friend that owns several different pieces of real estate, and his mortgage rates are anywhere from like 3.2 to, 4, maybe even 5, depending on when he purchased it. And he's taking the capital that he's made in his business and he's paying off all of his debt on his real estate because he just doesn't want to have any debt. In my mind, if you have a mortgage at 3.25 and you're paying that off just so you don't have debt, I see that as a grave mistake. Is that?
Yeah. But let me think. Yeah. I'm going to break this down in a big way. First off, we've been taught how to use language improperly around finance. So here's an example. When we look at a balance sheet, it's our assets versus our liabilities.
Yeah.
If you could buy a business tomorrow for 500,000 that you know is worth $1 million because the person has to sell quickly, is in distress, and it's in your wheelhouse.
Sure.
If you borrow $500,000 to buy that $1 million business, how much debt does the world tell you you have?
Well, the world would say 500,000 that you're in debt.
But the reality is you have the opposite. You have 500,000 of equity. Equity is the opposite of debt. So everyone in the world says they have 500,000 of debt, other than those in the know. There's no, they have 500,000 of equity. Yes, you have a loan for 500,000, but that gave you access to $1 million asset. So 1 million minus 500,000 is a positive $500,000 net worth for equity. So I don't say good debt or bad debt or that people are in debt. I say we have efficient loans and inefficient loans and consumer loans.
Yeah.
Consumer loans is when we borrow to consume. Avoid those because that is debt, because you don't have an asset that's attached to it. Efficient loans are ones where if I have a 3.5% mortgage and I know I can put money in treasuries at 5%, paying off that loan is costing me 30% return. Because if I could buy something for $3.50 and sell it for $5, that's close to a 30% markup. It's not the exact math, but sure, I think people kind of get the sense of it. And yet, if I'm willing to lend you, Charles, today, money at no interest, how much do you want?
But just, I'll take as much as I can get.
And how fast do you want to pay me back if I'm not charging you interest?
Take as much time as I need to take.
And why did you answer it that way?
Because I can make more money on the money that you've given me than I could if it just sat in a bank. Actually, even at no interest, making more money sitting in a bank account, period.
Right. So does that answer change much for you at 2%?
No.
Me either, because I know I could do better than 2%. Now it changes drastically at 20 because I go, okay, I got to earn out. Can I do that consistently? Now, if I'm getting a 6-to-1 return on ad spend, maybe it makes sense depending on, I maybe not allocate all of it right away. I might test some of it and see, because there is some risk to that. But a lot of it's because people don't understand money. They haven't healed their relationship to money. They've been born into scarcity and taught scarcity when it comes to money. And so anytime they owe something to anyone, they hear financial gurus say they're in debt when they're not. They're actually in equity. And the government actually wants people to borrow money because they continue to devalue the money through inflation. Because if we bought, if we traded in our gold for dollars when they went away from the gold standard, the dollar's worth 88 cents less than that day. So it's worth 12 cents on the dollar. It's been losing its store of value. And yet we're going to take that and try to pay off a loan early on when it's much more powerful. Like inflation is your friend when you buy assets, and when you have loans, it's your foe when you focus just on wages.
Now,
and so
asset is something that appreciates, is the way that I believe that you're classifying it, or has a return.
But
just so we're clear, asset does not also mean like your car.
Exactly. Like asset is something that is appreciating in value, has the potential for cash flow. Unless you're going to Turo that car and you got the time to manage it, which you have to take into consideration, and you're renting it out to other people, that's not really an asset because it's going down in value, and even your home isn't really an asset unless you're renting it out. I'm talking about assets that when inflation comes in, go up in value, assets that can create cash flow for you, not assets that are just creating lifestyle. I'm not against lifestyle assets. I'm all for them, but I don't want to confuse and collapse the two to mean the same thing. So good point.
Let's talk about the car for a minute, because that, I see a lot of wealthy individuals that, you know, they buy a car, and it's either they buy a car that's probably a little bit more than they should buy, or maybe their choices in financing or whatnot. So the $1 million question that people always ask when they go to the dealership is, do I buy it or do I lease it?
Yeah.
What do you do?
So we all have like in corporate finance, they have something called hurdle rate. If this guy that you're talking about is getting a 6-to-1 return on ad spend, hey, why go put money into something that's going to get you 100% return because you already got something that's going to get. So a new initiative might not make sense. So a lot of businesses, they won't start a new initiative unless it earns a minimum interest rate.
Yeah.
So cost of money is similar to hurdle rate. Cost of money is your highest rate you can earn or the highest rate you pay to borrow money. Here's the thing, there's always an interest cost, whether you pay cash and you forfeit the right to earn interest, or whether you borrow and you pay interest to use someone else's money. Most people never consider forfeiting the right to earn interest when they pay cash. They go, oh, look at all the interest I saved.
Yeah.
But you also lost the opportunity on that money because it was worth something if it could have been invested.
Sure.
So to me, when I was going to buy my first car, it was a 3.5 Acura RL. That was the type of car.
Okay.
But they still had last year's model on the lot. So what they did was, if you leased the previous year's model, it was $550 per month. But to buy the new model, you couldn't lease. You had to pay with cash or just do a loan. It was $880.
Yeah.
So what I decided was, I'll lease last year's model, take the difference, save it, then buy out the lease when the residual came in 39 months, and then just make the full payment to recover all the money. So that's when leasing made sense. The car was, over a certain price. So I was able to write off the full lease where I wouldn't have been able to write off the purchase. But I paid cash for my last vehicle just because I was like, I've got the cash. I don't want the hassle. It's nice not to have a payment, but it just depends on where you're at in life. There's gurus out there that say, oh, if you lease, you get fleeced. Or, there's people that there's just people that use their dogma without considering personal finance is meant to be personal. Where it might make sense for a lease is, you're not going to keep that car long-term. You don't know what the car market's going to be. You get a full write-off, and they have incentives because they're charging a lot less for a lease than they might be for a purchase. I also went, to buy an Escalade truck when they had the trucks back in the day. And when I went to lease it, the lease terms were awful, but the purchase terms were fine. They had the 0% finance for, 60 months. So I went with that. Why? Because I was looking at cash flow. I was looking at cost of money, and I could look at my own personal situation to make the choice and the judgment, where most people are just using this dogma of saying, always pay cash, never pay cash, always lease, always finance. And here's the thing about cars. I just think that if you love cars, great, go for a nice car. And if you don't waste it. I bought a Bentley back in the day because my partners convinced me that it was going to really bring in high-end clients. If it was going to bring in teenage boys for clients, then it would have been great because they stopped. If it was to bring in like money grubbing whores, there were definitely some of those women that wanted to get in the car that I was like, I'm married there. It doesn't matter to me. Like, it wasn't any help to our business whatsoever. So if you're not a car guy, no reason to buy a Bentley. It wasn't moving the needle for my business whatsoever. I drive a truck because I love a truck.
Yeah.
Does it mean that I'm a better financial guy or worse financial guy? It just means I know what I value when it comes to my money. And that's my number one thing for everybody else. Know what you value, dial those things up, know what you don't, and you can save the money from wasting it on impressing people that didn't need to be impressed in the first place, because they're going to lose interest just like you are, because you're going to rent happiness through purchases if it's not really aligned with who you are. There's certain things that you and I would pay extra for all day long that other people think is crazy. There's other things that I wouldn't pay an extra penny for that other people cherish. We all get to choose what value is to us. It's our perspective. And once we understand what we value, and once we understand what we can earn on our money or what we pay on our money, then we can make the choices based upon our circumstance, not based upon the guru's circumstance, pushing their own value system onto someone without principles.
It's funny when, when I made my first million, like back in the day, like for me, I ended up owning the largest home in the entire town, right on the golf course. And it was, I spend money on things that I probably shouldn't have spent money on and whatnot. But the thing is like, I did this because there was, I think, a level of insecurity as well. I needed to just show people that I was successful. But I also learned that I did that because I didn't have any scars yet. I made money and it happened quick. And then over time, the journey of entrepreneurship, you have your ups and you have your downs. And man, some of those downs that I had were really, really painful downs. But each time I had that down, I created these scars and I looked at money a lot differently. And you and I are friends with some really extraordinary people that have some extraordinary wealth. And I've learned that those people that are experienced, that have gone through the seasons, that have those scars, to many of our mutual friends, you couldn't tell their worth at all. And in fact, what I often find is that the wealthier you become, the less you want people to know you have it. And, one of the wealthiest guys that I know wears clogs, sweatpants, and a Predictable Profits t-shirt, right? And he's totally comfortable with that because he doesn't have anybody to prove anything to.
Right.
And I feel like there's a certain amount, you taught me something, and I brought it up earlier today with a client, and it was one of the greatest gifts that you've taught me. And I've taken so much from our conversations, and it was one of the best things you've ever shared with me. And you said, look, Charlie, there's a difference between being rich and being wealthy. Being rich, you can have really big bank account. Being wealthy has nothing to do with the size of your bank account. It's tied to the quality of your life. And you asked me, are you wealthy? And I'm like, I think so. I think so. And you had issued a challenge, and I don't know if you remember this, but you're like, ask your kids about the quality. Do they think they have a good quality of life? And so after you and I finished talking, I'm walking back to the room and I called my kids and I'm like, hey, I had this interesting conversation. I just got to ask you, like, do you think you have a good quality of life? And they not only did they say they had a great quality of life, but then they said one thing that it brought tears to my eyes almost immediately. They said, you want to know why we think we have a good quality of life? And I'm like, why? They said, because we generally want to spend time with our parents, and we don't know many of our friends that feel the same way that we do, but we really want to spend time with you. And I'm like, oh my God, like, oh, that's amazing. But it did change the context and the way that I spend money and look at money, because now when I look at it, I'm like, am I doing this to show I'm rich? But does it add to my quality of life? And if it doesn't add to the quality of my life, then I'm not doing this. It's like, I would rather spend the money on a adventure and family vacation. I'd rather spend money like we talked about earlier, where I was investing, several $100,000 to support my son and his racing career and all this other stuff, because that added to my quality of life. But I didn't have to show. Like there was a big difference, a big mindset change that for me, it was like a dope slap on the back of the head.
Well, like you said, it's your quality of life. Don't let someone else determine what your quality of life is, because then they're going to push their values onto you,
Right.
and not be the same thing. So, to me, wealth is our ability to be present, and being present means that we can have a high quality of life because we can be intentional. But we're taught in finance to live to one day of retirement and then just sacrifice our whole life until then. Well, guess what? If that's your belief system, then your kids wouldn't say, we love spending time with you, because they wouldn't have any time with you, because it'd only be about that one date in the future that when they're now watching that all you did was work, never spent any time with them, and now you've got the money to, going, all right, now it's time to hang out. They're like, what do you mean I'm working? Because they watched everything that you did. Like, we miss out on life for this future that doesn't even exist. And it actually makes people bad business owners because they don't delegate well. Like in the bro culture of social media, I always laugh when people brag about their 16-hour days. I'm like, get it. You don't know how to delegate. Congratulations.
All right. Right.
Like what, why is this something you're bragging about? I mean, I don't understand. It's an unnecessary Iron Man that they're doing there. But yeah, I mean, I think quality of life is at the forefront of everything around wealth, yet most financial advice diminishes it for a one day, someday promise.
Yeah. And I also like how you talked about, you basically have to earn your right to risk, right? So in the very beginning, it's like bring enough cash flow to give yourself 6 months of liquidity. And then you do that and then, move on. Now you use the number 18%. And is that pre-tax or post-tax?
Well, it's not 18% of what your business is doing. It's 18% of what your business pays you. And because I'm really good at helping mitigate tax, so it's always pre-tax for my clients because I can get the tax bill down so low. But I need 3% just to handle, technological change. You're going to be buying things in the future that don't exist today. 3% for planned obsolescence. Things break down, you have to replace them. 3% for propensity to consume. I don't know about you, but a luxury once enjoyed feels like a necessity, over time. Another 3% for inflation. Now, I know that there's more than just regular inflation. That's why there's these other 3%, and 3% for potential tax hikes. That's 15%. The last 3% is the living wealthy account. Just that guilt-free spending, and it could be more than that. But when you've really put away 15%, Richest Man in Babylon says 10%, but that was written before we saw inflation with the Federal Reserve and when we saw government spending at this level. So we had to up it a little bit. 10%, 15% is kind of the new 10% just to kind of be at even. But I'm telling you can save on tax, you can save on interest, you can save on non-performing investment fees and insurance to get you most of that 15% just by handling those 4 areas.
And where do you see real estate investments in the formula of earn your right to risk? Would you rather see somebody, because I know especially with the bonus Trump depreciation, commercial real estate is a huge opportunity right now in tax haven. But would you rather see investment go into market or investment go into real estate when it comes to, okay, now I have some cash aside and now I put my core 6 months, now I'm going to look to invest into something more?
So I believe in investor DNA. So I think that risk isn't in the investment, it's in the investor. So some people are good at real estate and others are not. So if they're not going to treat it like a business, then they might just get their butts kicked. Because one of the concerning things about real estate is, yes, we can have this bonus depreciation, but what happens when that goes away? Now you're left with the economics. And it might not be very passive. You might be very active in talking to bankers or attorneys or property managers or maintenance people. So you have to go, am I willing to carve out and dedicate some time to this? Because when people get involved in real estate syndications but don't understand it, they usually get their butts kicked. In private capital world of real estate, some people make a lot and a lot of people make nothing. It's like there's a wide variance there. The stock market for me isn't really the place I love to put money because it's like raising the white flag and being like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to put it in this index fund. For some people that want to be completely hands off, that's fine. It's easy, but it doesn't create cash flow. It doesn't create control. They don't usually have a lot of downside protection. So if given the choice between an index fund and real estate, I would pick real estate, but my real estate would be very specific to be in an area that I could drive to, an area that I know really well. And that even if I have other experts that are helping me, that I know that I can make it profitable on my own, because I've been in way too much real estate in the past where I was like, well, I'm the money, they're the intelligence. And then the market showed me they weren't as intelligent as I thought in 2008. So, you've got to really be able to master and mitigate risk.
And then what do you manage your wealth with any tools or software or anything that you find helpful?
There are decent softwares out there. There's a lot of people that are built up on eMoney platform where it kind of integrates everything and can show you kind of a snapshot of everything that's going on. I'm a brand ambassador for a company called X1 Wealth, and I like X1 Wealth the best. They're finishing their portal where you can upload all your documents and then it'll show you priorities. It'll analyze everything that you're doing. It'll use AI to say, hey, here's exposure you have, here's problems with your estate plan. So X1 Wealth is probably my favorite tool as far as being able to see what's going on and analyze it and prioritize it.
All right. Now, I know we're pushing up against the clock here. You've written a whole slew of books, and I understand them in one of the books. The story with me and Branson, I think that's Rockefeller Habits, if I remember right.
Then Killing Sacred Cows too.
All right, got it. Killing Sacred Cows too. Of all your books, if somebody is new to Garrett Gunderson and they say, all right, you know what, dude, you're saying something that tends to resonate with me. What would you say the first book they should pick up and read is?
Money Unmasked. It's my newest book, and it's still a book I'm personally learning from and getting value from. It's the foundational pieces of money to help you heal your relationship with money, to help you think in a much bigger context and understand your money persona so you know where your winning side is and your shadow side is and how to operate other people so you can get a lot further with a lot less risk. So that's like the foundational material. And if they just DM me on Instagram at Garrett B. Gunderson, Money Unmasked, I'll give them an audiobook. I'll just hook them up.
Money Unmasked.
Yep, Money Unmasked.
Money Unmasked. So actually, I would recommend everybody follow you on Instagram because you give these nuggets of information that are just really, really, really great. Even a woman I spoke to earlier today, who's one of the top women in finance, she actually said how much she enjoys your content. She follows you not only on Instagram, I know on LinkedIn, and I believe
I don't know if I post on LinkedIn, but I do a really good job with YouTube.
YouTube is, yeah. Well, I know she's huge on LinkedIn, so I assumed it was LinkedIn as well. But yeah, your YouTube channel, that's stellar. I mean, you've got over 100,000 folks following you there. You've done
just got this week, man.
Hey, congratulations.
So, yeah, I'm going tonight for a little rehearsal, and tomorrow we're going to start filming our YouTube in front of a live audience.
Wow.
So I that interaction. So I think that's going to up level it a little bit. But yeah, and it's either on wealth, quality of life, or legacy. So when you're talking quality of life, that's one of our key pillars that we're really focused on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know your Instagram. I see that pop up, all the time, and it's really great. I do recommend. So Garrett B. Gunderson is the handle on Instagram. And then people want to learn more about you, the work that you do. Then where do we send them?
Yeah, GarrettGunderson.com, although I'm revamping that whole website, thanks to you in part, which is good. You gave us great feedback on it. You got that brilliant. So Garrett B. Gunderson, or, honestly, just watching on Instagram or YouTube. Garrett Gunderson TV is YouTube, youtube.com/Garrett Gunderson TV.
And I know that you yourself are a successful entrepreneur. You've exited at least one company. You've done really well throughout life. So where this is the Beyond Seven Figures podcast, with all your experience, everything that you know now, what would you say is your best tip for our listeners right now who want to take their business beyond seven figures?
Well, my biggest lesson was not to outsource my insecurities. I think we outsource our weaknesses, but address our insecurities, because I partnered with people that weren't worthy of partnering with because I was insecure in those areas. And it could have just been, I could have hired you in one of those areas and you could have helped me develop the skill set. Then I could have hired someone to help me once I understood how to manage it. But I skipped that step, saying, I'll just partner with someone. And now I have someone with their own liabilities, their own insecurities, their own issues, their different work ethic, their different time of life. So, that was a mistake I made more than once until I finally figured it out.
I think to some extent, we all have gone down that road. I think that's a very common scar that a few of us, myself included, have made, a few times.
Yeah, because those are really painful, hard, heart-wrenching things to kind of resolve. And sometimes maybe where you're at right now, it's helpful, but what if you grow at a different rate? What if you have a bigger vision and they then just become about hanging on instead of supporting? And a lot of times it could have just been someone that was hired. So I only made the mistake 4 times, which seems ridiculous not to make it once, but twice, but a third, but a fourth time. And then I've turned down 3 partnerships in the last 3 months. I mean, it's just like, hey, I'm willing to do strategic relationships. I'm willing to, do some collaborations, but I'm not going to give you ownership of the thing that I'm going to be left holding the bag no matter what and doing everything it takes.
Sure.
So that was a big lesson for me. And there might be other better lessons, but that was just a big one.
There's a lot of discussion when it comes to AI and the future of AI. You've got, folks on one side of the aisle that is talking about the potential of UBI, universal basic income, that's coming, that, may be inevitable. You hear other folks like Jensen Huang, I believe that's his name, the CEO of NVIDIA, that says, look, AI just is going to create new markets, new opportunities, new everything. And he's extremely bullish in the future, as it relates to AI and all the disruptions that we're seeing right now. What is your future? What do you see? Are you very bullish in the future? What's your feeling right now?
I think that universal basic income is a bad idea. I've just never seen a social program work, and so I also think that AI will be extraordinarily valuable to make people more powerful and productive, not necessarily replace. I do think there's plenty of jobs that are going to become obsolete, just like when the printing press came out.
Sure.
The print press comes out, the Gutenberg, and people are like, this is going to destroy the world. Nobody's going to have a job. What about all the scribes? And you know what it did? Brought access to information to the masses. It increased their knowledge. So if you use AI as a tool, all of a sudden you can produce more, you can add more value. People are confused and think there's a finite amount of value, like there's this pie. And if AI takes a bigger slice of the pie, there's less for the humans, and the humans will be made obsolete. I look at this as being a completely revolutionary way to add to the world. It's like when the wheel came out. Imagine what it was like to be the first people to discover the wheel and what that meant for transportation and getting around.
Yeah.
Think about being around for the printing press. The thing that's going to be difficult with AI is how rapid it happens, and how slow the human being is to adopt, which will create a wealth gap in many cases for those people that aren't willing to do the work to understand and embrace AI. And then you're going to see really wealthy people get a lot wealthier with a lot fewer employees. And then there's going to be people that cry for socialism because they're going to say it's unfair. But what's unfair is to say someone's not going to learn about it, and we're going to punish the ones who do. That becomes a very inefficient system. So I think our biggest complication is, how do we continue to put purpose at the forefront of humanity so that this becomes an efficient tool to live out our purpose? And what if work is completely redefined? How will we have people find community and connection in the midst of feeling a lot of fear with these rapid changes? Because you and I were sitting in a room years ago where they talked about how fast this was going to move, and people just don't move as fast as it moves. You are unique that way. So I just say to people like, hey, there's going to be a whole new world of value creation we can't even predict, can't even see, we can't even understand. And so if we can start to embrace, how can we do more for people more efficiently? How can we do more for ourselves by having these superpowers that support us, that we don't have to get caught in the minutiae and the busy work? What could you create then? What if our vision could expand exponentially because the how and when to do it wasn't so onerous, because we had all this support from AI? I think that that's a lot more. And, we're hearing people like Elon saying there's a chance it's going to be utopia. What I do know is human beings will do almost anything to fight, to prevent change, because they like the consistency of knowing how they're going to put food on the table and a roof over their heads. I know because I come from a coal mining town. And even if there's much more efficient ways to provide energy, they don't want to hear about it because they were indoctrinated in, I'm a coal miner, that's all I know how to do. So what we have to do differently in humanity is not hold on to the past and wish nothing would change, and embrace the future and be uncomfortable, just like we began this talk with. To give a speech was uncomfortable our first time. To do comedy was uncomfortable the first time. To go out and dance to win over your wife, that was super uncomfortable. But when we're willing to get uncomfortable to learn new things, we get to rapidly enhance our skill sets because of the access to something that doesn't require expensive human being interaction for this human being to increase what I do. And so that's what I think we really have to embrace. Will it be disruptive? Yes. Will there be difficulty? Absolutely. Will we have weird things that happen that we are like, how is this the case of the world right now? When hasn't that not been the case?
Right.
This is just simply accelerating that.
I love that you said that. You're in good company. Jensen talked about when you look at AI is a task doer, but it doesn't have the purpose. And a good, worker has a purpose, and that AI is just to help them do the task to fulfill their purpose. So it's a multiplier, and it's, a short way of really just talking about what you're talking about. And it's going to force a human to think more strategically and more ways to add purpose, create value, make an impact. And those are the people that are going to end up getting an advantage in the future. So, dude, we've covered a lot today. We covered everything, like you said, from being uncomfortable. We talked a lot about cash and how to invest and set things aside and the mindset as it relates to it and so forth, and wrapped up with our thoughts on AI and then everything there in between. We covered a lot, man. And I really appreciate it. I know we're going to be getting together at some point soon. Again, Garrett B. Gunderson. Check him out over on Instagram, garrettgunderson.com. He's got a whole slew of books. Look him up over on Amazon. And then the Money Unmasked is the book that if you don't know Garrett and you're new to his stuff, grab that one as a good starting point. You can also send him a message, DM him on Instagram. He'll send you the audiobook for free. So that's a nice little benefit there. So that wraps up today's episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. And again, for more tips, strategies, and information to grow your business faster, more predictably, and less dependent on you, check us out at predictableprofits.com. Again, that's predictableprofits.com. This is Charles Gaudette with my buddy Garrett Gunderson, and I will see you in another episode.